Hello and welcome back to the workshop. I've always adored the original Xbox, but I've only gotten deep into it fairly recently. I thought now is the perfect time to pick up several systems and save them from the impending doom of the clock capacitor. Not only is it an awesome console with a ton of games to play, but it's become extremely cheap as well. But what else can you use this beast for? I heard it makes a pretty good emulation system, but just how good is it? The Xbox, released in 2001, packs an Intel Celeron clocked at 733 MHz. 64 MB of DDR RAM, which is shared between the CPU and the GPU, the latter being a GeForce 3 based NVIDIA chip. I'm sure there's plenty of power to emulate all the 80s and early 90s consoles, but today I want to explore the world of PlayStation emulation on the original Xbox, as it's one of my favorite consoles of all times. Can this be a cheap all-in-one emulation machine to play all my favorite PS1 games? Let's find out! For this experiment I'll be using my 1.4 TSUP flashed Xbox with Evo X BIOS. This has an 80GB max to parallel ATA hard drive in it, to which I've FTP'd some of my games over. Excuse the occasional noise in the video, I currently only have one RGB card cable that is from a third party. I've used the unofficial version 23 PCSXbox, which is a slightly altered version 22, but in functionality it should be the same. We are greeted with a fairly usable menu in PCSXbox and a lot of options, all kinds of tweaks, different emulation cores. These are not just for show, as you will have to tweak the emulator for every single game you try. Not a very streamlined emulator, it's more on the complex side. Now let's address the elephant in the room, something that most people may already know. The PlayStation utilizes two output resolutions in the NTSC region. Standard 480i for some games, but mostly for menus, and something called 240p, which is tricking CRT TVs of the era to display a progressive image instead of an interlaced one. Sadly, the Xbox is unable to output a 240p resolution, so in a sense it is similar to the PlayStation 3's emulation, as both upscale the output to 480i at the least. When I booted up my first game, I was shocked by the obscenely low frame rate and some graphical glitches. After tweaking some settings, I got slightly better results. Seems like the latest form of frame skipping is very aggressive and results in the frame rate to be adjusted in increments of around 5 FPS. So using the old frame skipping method can lift our frame rate from 5 to around 14, but not much further unfortunately. There seems to be no way to enable dithering, so Silent Hill has quite the color banding present. Gran Turismo 2, for example, rendered one frame every few seconds with the new frameskip method, but even without it, it was fairly unplayable. I tried using older cores, but in most cases it just became worse. Sometimes most of the audio was missing, like in Harry Potter games.
Hello! 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 Hello!
Other times the in-game graphics were quite interesting looking, like in the case of the Phantom Menace here.
I have a bad feeling about this.
When the Trade Federation Viceroy arrives, we must convince him to leave the system.
Will they agree to leave?
I am TC-14, protocol droid and servant of the Trade Federation.
You can also use HLE, high-level emulation, but I didn't really see any benefits of using it. Obviously I can test all games, but the ones I did test gave me a good idea of the state of PCSXbox. While compatibility seems to be very decent, I could run every game I threw at it. The frame rate will be low in almost every game, and if you disable frame skipping altogether, it will just slow the gameplay down.
Round 1. Fight!
For some this may be acceptable, but in my opinion the Xbox isn't really going to cut it as a PS1 emulator machine, unfortunately. I really wanted it to be worth the effort, but it's not. Being able to connect it to a CRT TV via SCART RGB cables is a nice added bonus, but a small Android box or a Raspberry Pi will do a better job. Even a Nintendo Wii using VSX-R with its very limited compatibility can run some of these games at full speed. There's a compatibility list out there, but it seems to be fairly outdated and incomplete. I'm aware of the 1.4 GHz duality Pentium 3 swap and the 128MB RAM mod, but those systems are rare and you lose compatibility with a lot of Xbox games. But I suppose if there's one thing they would excel at, is playing PSX games using PCSXbox, since you get more than twice the processing power. There wasn't really a lot of information out there on this emulator, so I hope this video helps anyone wondering about it. Thanks for watching.